Good evening. I'd like to call to order our regular council meeting at 6 p.m. I am Mayor McNeil Smith, and good evening to my colleagues this evening. On my far left, Councillor Novick, Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Rentoul. To my far right, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Garnett, and Councillor Duck is participating in the meeting via Zoom this evening. Good evening, Councillor Duck.
Good evening.
Hello, and thank you to staff in attendance at the meeting this evening, and welcome to members of the public who are in the council chamber or who may be watching the live stream of tonight's meeting. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that the town of Sydney is situated on the traditional territory of the Wasanich Nations, which includes the Sayote, the Sartlip, the Pakwachin, the Sycam, and the Malahat First Nations. In turning to approval of the agenda, we do have some changes to the agenda that was published last Thursday afternoon. The first is we have 4 pieces of additional correspondence. Those items came from Wendy Ewing, 2 items from Sarah Waddington, and one item from Jordan Milne. All 4 items will be placed under item 13I, which is the Cedarwood former Cedarwood Inn property. The second change is Councillor Garnett has requested raising item 15.6, a letter of correspondence regarding garbage and recycling, and that will become item 14B under correspondence. The third item is I wish to move adoption of minutes under number 7 to immediately following this approval of agenda. We would then commence with public participation, and then I would also like to move item 14A, which is an item of correspondence regarding the Sydney Transit Hub, to happen right after public participation. And then following that, I would like to move up item 13I regarding the Cedarwood Inn property immediately following that item. And we would then continue with the remainder of the agenda from item 9 through to the end as published. And with that, I would seek a mover and seconder that the agenda be approved as amended. Moved by Councillor Novick.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Garnett. All in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. And next, we have 2 sets of minutes to approve, those from our regular council meeting of July 15th and those from our special council meeting on August 12th. So I would look for a mover and seconder to approve the minutes. Councillor Novick.
Second.
And Councillor Garnett. Any errors or corrections? Seeing none, all in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. And so we'll now go to public participation portion of the meeting where members of the public have an opportunity to come forward. We ask that you keep your remarks to 4 minutes. And for a first time, I will ask anyone who wishes to come forward to please come to the podium. There is just a little button to turn on the microphone. You'll see a red light. Good evening.
Hello, my name is Eric Diller. I'm a resident of Sydney. And this evening, I'm speaking to you on 2 subjects. Item 1 is the June 17th meeting regarding the Sydney Transit Hub. And the second item is kind of regarding the building in which we stand tonight, or sit. And so what you see here is a first kick at the can, first throw at the wall of stuff to see what may stick. And this is an idea that I had a long time ago about what a new town hall for Sydney might look like. And I realized that given our new OCP, it is not in compliance with that, being a 7-story building. And I actually thought about altering this image in order to present it tonight, but then I considered the depth of the housing crisis in which we exist in, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to present it as is, this being a first kick at the can. And so what I'd like to encourage council to explore is to explore the idea about modifying the Sydney Transit Hub to have this covered area in which buses could exchange passengers, where people would be out of the rain and out of the sun, give them some dignity in which to do that in, and also to give staff at our town a great place to work, right close to many amenities, which, I mean, this facility is as well. But yeah, but also to partner with other entities such as CRD Housing and the Ministry of Housing and Island Health to give supportive residences to people who may wish to live in this area. The housing crisis has been very prominent, and the Sydney business community has been very vocal in their expression that this is actually something that we need to put more emphasis on. And so yeah, this is what I'm offering, just as a, yeah, like I say, first kick of the can. And but I'd also just like to say that I really do appreciate BC Transit staff making the presentation to this council, and I would encourage council to move forward with that as well. And I realize that if the transit hub gets built first and then this is explored later, that's going to result in some disruptions. But yeah, I just think that both of these could be worked on. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diller. And as you noted in your letter of correspondence on the matter that is included in the agenda, Council does have in its strategic plan this term to consider a future town precinct, and we will throw that idea in the hopper. Thank you. I'll call for a second time anyone wishing to come forward, please. Please provide your name and the municipality you reside in, and there's just a little button there to turn the microphone on live.
My name is Aria, and sorry, pardon me, I'm a little bit nervous. I live on 9522 Lochside Drive, the former Cedarwood Hotel. So I just want to acknowledge everyone, thank you, respectfully, just to put my voice in here. I am Cree Métis from Treaty 8, Northern Alberta. I am grateful to live here and work here. I was the first to move into 9522 Lochside Drive, to be honest with you, actually the day they got approval, is what I was told. I rent one of the cute cabins in the back. I was cutting hair on 3rd. It was convenient to bike to work. I am studying to be a counselor on this side. I've cut a lot of gentlemen's hair, their children and families in the town of Sydney. I do contribute to community. The rent is $1,800. I pay hydro and internet. My lease is technically still valid through RTB, I was told. I am Indigenous. I receive a rent subsidy through BC Housing. Pardon me, I do not qualify for that if Cedarwood changes to a hotel, which there's no clarity on that yet. Also, I didn't sign up for that, but that's another thing. I haven't received an official notice to end tenancy, just a piece of paper with an email address on it if I want to stay on as a hotel guest. GMC has been relatively dodging communication as of today. I bumped into one of them this morning at the grocery store. I love Sydney, it's so small. No apology, etc., although it seems like there's a lot of different opinions and stories about what is happening or what could happen with Cedarwood. The inevitable is that I will move, and it is a stepping stone, though now I'm caught in this paperwork crossfire as well. They say that the Cedarwood was deemed electrically unsafe and also fire alarms, so there's another issue of it being short-term housing, etc., and it's not even being affordable. Some of the quality residents have been caught in the crossfire police where there are several times the last couple of weeks while GMC wasn't responding at all. If it's a rental, typically there's some type of controlled environment, and if it's a hotel, same thing. I just wanted to offer my perspective and take into consideration more than just the electrical work. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to come forward this evening. I'll call again for a second time if there's anyone wishing to come forward. And I'll call for a third and last time if there's anyone wishing to come forward. Seeing none, thank you to those who did come forward this evening, and I'll close public participation. We are now moving to item, what is published on the agenda as item 14A, and I'm just going to turn to that. So this was a letter of correspondence regarding concerns regarding proposed BC Transit Hub location. We have an email from the Centers Peninsula Veterinary Hospital dated July 15th, included in the council package. And I would turn to staff, please. Mr. Hissick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rather than referring to staff as indicated on the agenda, we would recommend that it be referred to BC Transit future public engagement on their proposed options. That is where it likely should be considered. From a staff perspective, though, I'd like to say that there should be no expectation that public roads will be appropriated in this way to serve a specific business. Those needs should be met on private lands, and there's a large drop-off area on the other side by Tim Hortons that should be able to accommodate this use. With that being said, however, the recent parking study did recommend looking at one loading space in each block, and this location might be considered if it can be made to work within that transit plan following the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hisik. I might ask staff just for an update. I know we did have it presented to council a couple of months ago with regards to the process that BC Transit is at right now. I believe the proposed concept is next going forward to the Victoria Transit Commission in September, and then the BC Transit will then commence public engagement. Ms. Clary?
That is correct.
Thank you. So, council, if we could, I would seek a motion for us to refer this to the Councillor Rintoul.
I'll move that the letter be referred to BC Transit as a part of the consultation process.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate being made aware of the concern that's been brought forward here with respect to the prospect of losing access along the roadway there for potential bus, a bay for a bus to sit in prior to it proceeding to the new transit location. And I think this is exactly, as was noted by staff and the mayor, exactly a part of the consultation process that BC Transit will undertake. So at this point, that particular location has been identified certainly as being a prominent opportunity for a transit hub. But these are the sorts of, I think, housekeeping fine-tuning that are going to be important. And I'm pleased that members of the community are attuned to this and able to articulate those potential challenges to BC Transit, and I hope they'll be receptive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thanks. At the time that we first reviewed the proposal from BC Transit, we did ask about public engagement because we identified the desire on council's part, I believe, many members of council, that we needed to get input from surrounding businesses. And the reason I voted for this to move forward, and I think many members of council, is that it was our expectation that that type of consultation would take place, and that we weren't fully approving the exact proposal as laid out, but that we were agreeing to see it move forward, and part of that would be in engagement. So I agree that it makes sense to refer this to that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Seeing no further discussion, I'll just comment that BC Transit in its presentation also indicated that, as I mentioned earlier, it is going to the Transit Commission for approval in principle and then public engagement. BC Transit indicated that we're in a 2 to 3 year process. They will have to then go forward with a business case for that, and then go into final design, taking into account input from all sources. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And so we're next turning to the former item 13I, which is the property notice at former Cedarwood Inn and Suites at 9522 Lochside Drive. And I would turn to Mr. Hisik, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It should be noted that this continues to be a fluid situation, and every media response, every council report is based on the best information we have at that time. So the town has been clear all along that our concerns were based on the safety of the occupants and the neighborhood. We're taking our responsibilities to ensure public safety very seriously and using whatever powers are available to us to push for the improvements we believe are necessary. The staff report includes details about what our safety concerns are and why. I'm not going to reiterate those here. So it has to be said that it was never the town's intention to displace any tenants. Our intention all along was to ensure the necessary improvements to make the building as safe as possible are put in place. It's truly unfortunate that the new owner was not forthcoming with their intentions for the property during the rezoning and development permit stage. Had their intentions been made clear, town staff would have been able to provide professional advice that may have reduced the impact on the occupants. With all that being said, town staff today settled on a generous interpretation of the 186-day stay limit for motel occupation. January of 2025 will reset the clock on that limit, allowing continuing occupancy up to the 5th of July next year. So for anyone who signed a one-year tenancy agreement, which should not have been offered by the property owner, this should satisfy the full year's commitment. And there was no commitment beyond that, as everyone should know. However, this generous interpretation remains contingent on the property owner continuing to make meaningful progress on meeting the fire department's requested safety measures. So that requirement is still in place. We're just doing this as a good faith gesture to allow people who are caught up in this to remain while it's being worked out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hisik, for that introduction, and thank you also to staff for the full report, providing all of the information as it is current today in the staff report. It is a report for information for council. I would turn to colleagues if there are any questions or comments. Seeing none, we're receiving it by Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe, I'm sorry I missed your hand.
Thank you. A question through you to staff, and just because I think this is something that I hear from the community, and I'm still wanting to clarify in my own mind. So in terms of, there's no necessarily building code issues. There's issues that have been required by the fire department. What is there like a fire code, or what is the code that we look to, for those sorts of things? If it's not the building code, is there a fire code? And are there fire code infractions? I'm just wondering what our authority is on that.
Thank you. I'll turn to Chief Mickelson.
Through the chair to Councillor O'Keefe, to be clear, and at the last meeting I tried to be as clear as possible, there are no BC Building Code or Fire Code interpretations for the motel use. That building was built to the pre-1979 building code, so there are no fire code or building code requirements. The fire department and the town are seeking safety improvements under the business bylaw, and that was validated by our legal advice for life and safety improvements specific to that facility. So it's under our business bylaw and the regulating authority provided by the community charter. That's the authority we're pursuing these improvements under.
Yeah, thank you. And I understand that aspect. I guess what I'm just getting to is I would think that there would be some sort of rule or something as to what are the things that are considered, safety infractions. If it's not the building code, what's our authority for? And I know it's under the licensing bylaw, we can do that, but what do we base those safety concerns on? If it's not the building code, what are the things where it states this is an unsafe practice? And if those things weren't in place before, when it was a motel, how are they issues now?
So once again, through the chair to Councillor O'Keefe, again, through the issuance of a business license that permits the town to enforce and review additional requirements that were not in place prior. So when there's a change of ownership or a change of business, that enacts the business license process, which includes the provision for health and safety upgrades. So in the context of what requirements or code requirements are, we made it very clear to the proponents that it makes no sense, especially in the current environment, from a housing perspective, that we expect a full CAN ULC fire alarm system to be installed. That has never been the ask. We've solely requested that they provide some options under the alternative solution process, which we have offered. So as the authority having jurisdiction, we can ask for an alternative solution, and we're requesting interconnected smoke alarms and that they're monitored. That is on the basis that there is no other building in the town of Sydney where more than 10 people sleep that do not have at least some form of annunciation or alarms that in the event there was a fire that would notify the residents. At this time, there's 2 large non-sprinklered wood frame buildings with only in-suite smoke detectors. The only ability to notify residents if there was a fire would be someone basically going door to door to evacuate the other residents within those individual large structures. And then we would also be relying on someone to physically call 911 and wait for the triage and dispatch process, resulting in long delays. And that dramatically reduces the rescue and survivability profile of those residents. So based on that rationale, we're requesting that GMC provide an alternative solution for a much less costly system, but will still afford the residents there some degree of life safety that we feel as the town would be appropriate and commensurate with the other buildings that we have in our housing stock at this time.
Okay. And so one question that I've been getting, and that's why I'm asking, is that hotel was operating, as a motel was operating, it didn't have fire suppression at that time, and so presumably we thought it was okay. So have there been changes that have been made, like under the current, you know, now that they're operating again as a motel, are there things that are different that are increasing the hazard?
Well, again, we can only enforce the code of the day, and we
Right.
enforced the code of the day at that time, which was the functioning in-suite smoke detectors, albeit not interconnected, fire extinguishers, safety placarding, safety fire plans. Those were all enforced as per the requirements of the day. Again, when the building or the ownership changes hands and there's a potential change in use, whether it seems to be an ever-evolving apartment/motel use, again, under the context of a motel, there was an innkeeper there that acted as a on-site fire safety person that would also be able to be a responsible person that we would go to in the event of an emergency and say, are these people in this northeast quadrant, are they evacuated? Are they still there? Are they not? Those would be the responsibilities. To our understanding now, that's absent, and we can't rely on that.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe, and thank you, Chief. I'll turn to Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Mayor. Questions to the staff, if I may. First is, if you, specifically, Chief, you mentioned some alternative solutions to this, to resolve the fire safety issue. What are those alternative options available to the owner, and what's the timeline? And my concern is here that you've indicated that there's a fire risk here, and so that people living there want to know that they're safe, and so how is this, you know, implemented so that they can stay there and this fire plan can be put in place?
So through the mayor to Councillor Duck, that's an excellent question, and I believe as Acting CEO Hisik articulated, this is kind of a continuing evolving situation, and all we're doing is trying to continue to discuss with GMC that the onus is on them to provide us, whether they engage various code consultants or other experts, to provide us with something on paper that we can review as the authority having jurisdiction. And again, our goal is to work with them as quickly as possible to get a rudimentary, inexpensive system That's obviously, that makes sense based on the fact that this is only supposed to be a temporary use, and there's a pending development, plus or minus 24 months, so large expense does not make sense, but we're looking for something that provides the residents with the ability, if there is an incident or a fire in one of the suites, we're looking for an interconnected system, so everyone in that rest of that structure would be notified and given that pre-warning that to evacuate, and that that system is monitored, so we're notified right away and there isn't a delay in our response. That is basically the threshold that we're looking for, and the onus is on GMC to provide us with that via experts or a code consultant or whatever they come up with. We're awaiting on them.
Thank you, Chief. And again, a follow-up question to that. So you're not providing them with sort of alternatives. They have to come up with those alternatives and bring them back to you, and hopefully they fit within the fire agreement or code that you need. I'm a little concerned that, as Councillor O'Keefe pointed out, that this was a pre-existing condition. So I'm concerned that the people that were staying there before were at risk through the entire operation of the motel, and yet, you know, we're only addressing that now. So I'm a little concerned that that case exists. I realize that the Cedarwood is a unique property in Sydney. It's not an internal access premises, as you know. All the units exit to the outside. So I can appreciate that it may be difficult to interconnect those, because isn't that mean that there has to be wiring between each of the units connecting those and a master panel of some sort?
Again, through the mayor to Councillor Duck, our initial discussions or our recommendation to GMC was to explore a wireless solution. Again, we're in the business of putting out fires and inspecting installed systems. We're not, wireless systems are not common because they're not CAN ULC rated. But in this circumstance, a larger kind of household or wireless system may be the best option from a cost and meeting our objective perspective. Again, pulling wire through two large buildings in something that's going to be, potentially demolished within 24 months makes no fiscal sense. Therefore, we recommended that they potentially pursue a wireless option, be much less expensive, and then obviously there would be no disturbance to the residents as well, other than simply likely installing them in suite. They wouldn't be pulling wire or incurring the cost of a large kind of construction process.
Fair enough. Thank you, Chief. Further to that, just to help me understand more, is that is a wireless system acceptable in terms of fire insurance and liability over, can we get that accredited so that it can be used in this case? Because and certainly in what I found out online, wireless systems on a large scale are not particularly viewed as insurable or even legal.
Again, through the mayor, the Councillor Duck, again, what we're trying to do is under the basis of an alternative solution, which is provided as an option to authorities having jurisdiction. So we look at the, the risk versus benefit. And again, it's very important that this very usable housing stock stays in place, especially under the current situation. So our recommendation would be is that we put these basic life safety appliances in place, and recognizing it's not a CAN ULC rated system, so it's not a certified or verifiable system, but it still provides some degree of safety to the residents under the guise that it's a temporary solution. We're seeking a temporary solution to bolster the life safety of the residents until such a time it's rebuilt or there's a different structure on that property.
Thank you, Chief, and I appreciate you looking into options that can be, compatible with both the town and the fire department and the owner of the property. But most importantly, I'm concerned about the residents. And so when we look at this, what sort of timeline would you see? That was one of my first parts of my questions. Just what sort of timeline makes this accommodating the safety risk of the residents there?
That's an excellent question. Pardon me, sorry. Our goal would be to get some information from GMC as quickly as possible. And at that time, we would work diligently with them to figure out exactly what a reasonable time frame would be. We would hope it'd be weeks to less than a month would be ideal, but then again, there may be a circumstance where certain hardware required to be procured. That would be something we'd have to wait for, but again, we're just really waiting for them to step up and advise us what the options are, what due diligence they've done.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate the work that's being done, and certainly I'm sure the residents are feeling a little more comfortable that A, they can stay there, and B, that somebody's looking after their safety. So I hope that between the town and the fire hall and GMC, they find a solution that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. I think some of Councillor Duck's follow-up questions covered what I was going to ask, but I guess I will just say that one thing I've not heard from the chief, and of course it's because his job is to look at it from a operational perspective, but in terms of what residents can look at for safety, I know having, and Councillor O'Keefe was asking what made this different, and that seems to come back from the public a fair amount, is why is it different if people have been living there long-term all along, and the difference is that now officially the town knows this, and that there's a big difference between a building where people are changing all the time and a large fraction of that building is possibly sitting empty a great deal of the time in the off season, and a place where people know that they're living there all the time, full-time, all day. And that the type of uses that people will, and the type of things people will do in those rooms is definitely going to change in that case. For example, it's much easier if you're a smoker and you're staying overnight for only a couple days in a motel to be very diligent about going to the designated smoking area when you need a smoke. It's a lot harder when you're living there full-time and the weather is bad 8 months of the year. Somebody somewhere might get sloppy. I also, having spent some time living full-time in hotels myself for work, know that somebody's probably putting some kettles in, there are going to be some curling irons, and there's going to be some hot plates, and all sorts of things are going to be being used on a far more regular basis, which always ups the risk. And so knowing that the fire chief is not going to be there all the time, and that a lot of people don't understand the risks to just regular electricity and old buildings. Being the daughter of an electrician, I know this well. That's what paid my family's mortgage. That people are going to be doing things that are risky without knowing it because people don't understand old buildings. And the fire chief and other firemen are never surprised when fires move very quickly through old buildings like that, and when they started in the first place, even though the general public frequently always says they are. And so it's not an idle consideration for the people who know. And knowing this, I'm hoping that the people who live in this building are going to be extra diligent now that they, understand the difference in the type of precautions and the age of the building. That hopefully that they'll be extra careful too, diligent with their safety. This is the first I've heard about what people are paying to stay in that accommodation, and I'm keep my thoughts about that to myself. So I am hoping that this will be bringing up kind of issues maybe into the broader awareness at some people's expense that didn't create the situation, and of course they're bearing the brunt of it. But hopefully it means that as these issues come up, all of us will be able to work together to deal with them. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I want to thank staff again and for the questions and discussion that arose, and that staff are working as expeditiously as possible to move this forward to the satisfaction of all parties. We don't have a motion. We don't need a motion to receive that report on our agenda, so we will consider that matter dealt with, and next turn to the remainder of the agenda will be as published, and I'm now turning to item 9A. And this is Rise and Report from in-camera meeting minutes. And council had a special council and camera meeting on June 17th and July 15th of this year. And we passed 3 resolutions. And I'm reading those resolutions this evening for information. The first, or number one, is that vacation leave policy number PR-5.1 be amended by reducing the maximum amount of unused vacation time that may be carried forward from 150% of 1 year's entitlement to 50%. And two, that attendance recognition policy number PR-5.7 for exempt staff be rescinded and exempt staff now be made eligible for the same personal, emergency, and family leave provision that the union receives, and that existing exempt staff shall remain eligible for the acquisition of retirement leave provision of the rescinded policy until such time that this benefit is replaced with a suitable salary or benefit adjustment. And three, that the CAO and CFO may implement the transitions in exempt allowed time off allowances within a reasonable phase-out period at their discretion. To just comment very briefly, this item arose. We had a long-term employee retire in recent months, and there was quite an amount of carry forward time that was an expense for the town of Sydney. And both council and a member or two of the public identified it, and so council has considered it and is in the process of staff. It has been communicated to staff when we first rose it from in-camera minutes, and now we are doing so in public this evening. I'm next turning to item 10, which is the mayor's report, and the only item this evening is the CRD board highlights from our July 10th CRD board meeting. This is for information only. I don't normally highlight it further than what's provided in the agenda. The highlight report in the agenda does have several links, and I think this is a helpful way for CRD business that impacts residents of the region and Sydney residents to come forward for residents to see, for my council members of colleagues on council to see. And so I will turn to colleagues if there are any questions arising from that CRD board highlights. Seeing none, we have received that on our agenda, and I'm turning to item 11 now. And Councillor Garnett, who is our liaison to the Sydney Museum and Archives and Shaw Centre for the CLHC, will provide updates.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll begin with the Sydney Museum and Archives Society. Latest board meeting was July 20th. Financially, the museum continues to be in good shape with visitor donations as of June 24th at just under $60,000 and a net income of just under $17,500. The museum set up a booth at the Pride Festival, which was held on June 15th at Beacon Park, and they had a great interaction with attendees. I stood in their tent for a while with them. There was quite a lot of interest in the postcards they have, which have historical pictures of Sydney. And it was also quite interesting to watch some young children try to figure out how to use an old manual typewriter and a rotary phone. That's just me. That was enjoyable for me. Our Living Languages First Peoples Voices in BC exhibit finished on July 24th and was very well received. And myself and Councillor Novick and Mayor McNeil Smith attended the screening of two Wasanich film productions on June 17th, followed by a discussion and question period with elders. And I just want to acknowledge and thank the elders for sharing their personal experiences with those in attendance. Finally, the latest feature exhibit, Lost Liberties, the War Measures Act from the Canadian Museum of History, opened on August 5th. This exhibit examines the internment of Ukrainian Canadians during World War I, the internment of Japanese Canadians during World War II, and the FLQ crisis in Quebec in 1970. I attended the exhibit on its opening day and was impressed with the presentation and information provided. And when looking at the pictures from the FLQ crisis, it strangely enough brought back memories of a boy, not quite 6. And I do remember watching the nightly news and feeling the tension in the country at the time. So it really struck a chord with me. And I would also like to signal out the fact that the staff of the museum for their work on a local component of this exhibit. So all staff members provided something, and it helps to add to the overall journey through these difficult moments in our nation's past. So the executive director, assistant director, and archivist, outreach, and volunteer coordinator, and both summer students have provided some portion in the part as you go down the stairs. They've all contributed a piece that connects it to local history. And this is kind of building upon what the executive director, Mr. Goodchild, his sort of aim is to make sure that no matter what we bring in here, local history is kind of the top priority. And that's the end of the museum report.
I'll just Pause for a moment if there are any questions from colleagues. Seeing none, please continue. Oh, Councillor Duck, please go ahead. Have to have a third eye tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I also attended the opening of the First Nations, and it was very well done. And kudos to museum staff for engaging and continuing to assist in reconciliation in our community, and just to acknowledge them for the great work they did in this and integrating it into their annual displays. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. The Shaw Centre for this, one
sorry.
more.
No, sorry.
No
No,
worries.
I just want to comment and pass along to the museum how much I appreciate that effort they're making to incorporate local history. So it's one thing to have an exhibit about something, but having that focus on how it's relevant to a local community is really important. So kudos to them for doing that. Thanks.
I'll pass that along. I'm sure they'll appreciate it. Sure. The last one, the Shaw Centre for the Salish Sea, and attended the latest board meeting on July 30th. The first month of the new fiscal year, which was June, saw the centre on target to plan for both finances and visitorship. The summer programs are in full progress, and they're going along very well. And I can comment, I see on my walks through Sydney regularly the leaders with their children walking through either on Glass Beach, in the Beacon Bandshell, or just wherever around the pool outside of the centre. And it's really inspiring to see young minds learning so much more about the Salish Sea. This is an important resource we have right next to our community. There's a new smaller exhibit in the jewel habitat case, and it's called the Whale Fall exhibit. It discusses the 4 stages of a whale fall as an entire ecosystem is created when a whale dies and sinks to the ocean floor. It's quite interesting to see how a life form in the ocean dies and can create a whole other ecosystem upon its death. I think it's really informative, and I'd advise anybody that wants to check it out. It's really well done. The current exhibit, Drawing Connections, 40 Years of Art and Hope for the Salish Sea, continues till the end of the year. And staff are currently working on their next feature exhibit, which will be something in the line of Pollinators Are Essential. So another important part of their educational journey as an institution. And finally, for those who are interested, the AGM is tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, October 22nd at 6:30 p.m. at the centre.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions or comments. Seeing none, we've received those reports, and we'll next turn to item 12, which are committee reports, of which we have 2. The first under 12A is minutes from the Emergency Planning Committee meeting of June 19th. There are no recommendations, and this is for information. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Just a comment on one of the things in the round table, the last paragraph about the communication stuff. And I'm just pleased to see that extra emphasis and focus on emergency communications. And I hope that we'll also be looking at what sort of non-electronic communications we might, come up with. Someone I was talking to not long ago talked about the earthquake that they had. I believe it was down in Auckland years ago. And cell towers were out, electricity was out. They ended up having to rely on kids on bikes to send messages out to different communities. And I thought, we get so reliant on, texting or going online or phoning. And it really made me think about in a major disaster, if those normal communications are down, like what are we gonna do? So I'll look forward to hearing what we come up with. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. And thanks to Councillor Novick, who is our council representative on that committee. Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to address Councillor O'Keefe's concerns, one of the things that does work very well and has worked well for many, many years are the network of ham radio operators that still exists throughout the world, of which I fortunately count myself as one. And I've had personal experience with a family member who was caught in that big earthquake in Mexico. I think it was 1976 or 1977. And the only way we were able to connect with that person was through the ham radio network. So it still exists, it still works, and it is a very important part of all emergency planning programs. PMO is the emergency measures organization for the peninsula. They have a very robust ham radio group that continues to help when there are emergencies. And there's, beyond that, a large number of individual hams that will be there to help out when time dictates. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. So moving on to item 12B, which are the minutes from our Committee of the Whole meeting from August the 12th, last Monday evening. We're receiving those minutes on our agenda. Are there any errors or corrections? Seeing none, we'll have received those minutes, and I'll turn to Councillor O'Toole, who chaired that Committee of the Whole meeting. Councillor?
Thank you. Committee of the Whole recommends, and I so move, that development permit application number DP 100840 to permit the form and character of a 4-unit residential building, and development variance permit application number DV 100336 to increase the lot coverage from 50% to 54.2% and to reduce the front yard setback from 4.5 meters to 2.16 meters for the property at 2312 Orchard Avenue be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for review and comment.
I'll second.
We have it moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. We're now turning to item 13, which are staff reports. And the first item under 13A is the subdivision application number SA 100224. And I'll turn to Ms. Verhagen for an introduction, please.
Thank you. This application is the subdivision application for a 4-lot subdivision at 9376 Lochside. The part that's coming to council is the requirement for parkland dedication. Because we have policies in our OCP that speak to parkland in Sydney and future provision and location of parkland, it is council's decision whether to request payment in lieu, so cash in lieu of actual land, or land of 5% of the property. So the report goes through some background policies and includes some policies out of the OCP, the Official Community Plan bylaw, as well as Sydney's Parks Master Plan, and then touches on the Parkland Needs Assessment that was presented to Council in December 2023. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Verhagen. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. If not, if I could look to someone to move the recommendation. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you. I'll move that cash in lieu of parkland dedication be required for subdivision application number SA 100224 for the property at 9376 Lochside Drive.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor, did you wish, as the mover, Councillor O'Toole?
I just note, that it was contained within the staff report that the property, given its size restrictions, is perhaps not appropriate to identify a pocket park at this location, and hence the recommendation, reinforced for cash in lieu, and I support that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. And when I first looked at this, I looked at the site plan, potential site plan, and I was gathering information and looking that, the west side is typically the only place it's going to be able to have happen on this property. And I thought to myself for a time, like if we make a pocket park there, then we can protect the trees that are there. That's always my first go-to response. But there's a fair amount of trees on the west side, and you don't really know how it's going to be developed. But I went out to the site, and I was looking at sort of a definition of what a typical pocket park is, and they basically say it's about the size of a tennis court, which is about 2,800 square feet. And looking at the ones that are provided as examples in the staff report, I went to Mark Kinch Place Park just to try and eye it up. That's the way I have to see things anyways, in terms of less than half of the park. And yeah, I agree, it's not a great space for using as a park. And the other thing I would note, and sort of tipped me over to agreeing with it, was I noticed that there's a statutory right of way that also goes under that particular area on the site plan. So the potential of having to dig up a park doesn't make any sense either. So I think the money, approximately $130,000, can be better served acquiring other places in our community. And staff has mentioned Boulder Park and other parts of West Sydney. So that's why I'll support the motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? That motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And item 13B is also a subdivision application. Its number is SA 100225. And I'll again turn back to Ms. Verhagen.
Thank you. Yeah, this application is a two-lot subdivision proposal for the property 10255 Rest Haven. Again, the portion of the application that's coming to council for consideration is a request to waive the frontage requirement. All properties in BC being subdivided are required to have a minimum of 10% of their perimeter, or the measurement around the property, fronting onto the street. So the two properties proposed here would have less than that fronting onto the street. The report goes into some detail about the shape of these long, narrow properties fronting onto the water, and that this property was designated by the OCP in 2022 as being within the Roberts Bay environmentally sensitive area as it was before. So trees would be protected through that development permit area, and any building would require a development permit before construction on the property. Again, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff, I'm wondering, looking at the waiver and the other variance permit application with regards to the building size, building area being less than 9 by 9, 8.12 meters. If we approve the waiver, then don't we, I'm thinking logically in my mind, you have to approve the variance permit, otherwise how can anything be developed on the lot?
Thank you. Through to Councillor Garnett. That's a good question. The reason that variance application hasn't come in yet is because if council does not grant the waiver, then the subdivision application has to be denied. There's no way to continue with reviewing the application if the frontage requirement isn't waived. So if council waives the requirement, then the applicant would be required to apply for that variance as part of the subdivision review process. But you're right, if council denied that variance, that too would cause the application to be denied.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, if we have a recommendation. Councillor O'Keefe?
Sure. I'll move the recommendation that Section 4.1 of Subdivision and Development Bylaw number 1390, that no parcel of land has less than 10% of its perimeter fronting on a street, be waived for proposed lots A and B of the subdivision of 10255 Rest Haven Drive.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. I'll turn to the mover and seconder.
Nothing for me.
Any other discussion? Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have to be honest, I struggle with this. I went out to the site and looked at it, and it's attached to the having to basically provide a variance permit if you provide the waiver, otherwise it doesn't really do anything. And I can't help but think, even under zoning bylaw 2015, or I mean, how many other variances are going to be required to even build anything? And I'm looking at the 4.1 that was added in here, and number 3, existing parcel or parcels contravene the 10% requirement, and it's 9.6 currently. And the proposed subdivision will improve the lot design, and I don't think it does. I don't think, in my mind, it doesn't. And when I look down at the OCP 12.4.8, talking about limitations on subdivision of parcels in ESAs to ensure retention of larger lot sizes, protection of trees, green space, and so forth, I think this flies contrary to that for me. I just don't, looking at the lots as they're split up, I just don't, there's a real bind for me with this one, because it doesn't, for me, it doesn't align with 12.4.8, given that it's in an ESA, environmentally sensitive area, and what can be built on there. And I know staff speaks to the trees being on the east and the west, but I do have concerns about potential house movement on to Nickel Brothers, and having all the trees at the front have to go, and potential development based on the strange lot size and what that would mean to the trees at the front. And so I don't think I can support it, just because it does, for me, seem in opposition to what 12.4.8 of the OCP stands for in terms of the ESA and protection of natural resources in that area. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, if I may, I wasn't going to speak to this because at this point it was simply a waiver for the reasons that staff have outlined in the report, which is that these lots are already disproportionately long to wide, and so this seemed like a reasonable waiver. But just for the record, because we have not actually seen a development variance permit come forward for this, I'm comfortable with allowing the proponent to now, if they so choose, prepare a request and come forward with it. I don't know what they might build on this, but I could envision there being potentially some sort of duplex, a stratified lot in which a building not much larger than the one that is currently there could be built on this, on two now separated stratified lots. And so I'm not going to prejudge what might be built there and whether it would be suitable in this ESA, and we'll welcome it coming forward if it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like my colleagues, I have some concerns about this. This will yield two very long, narrow lots. Width at the street would be about 30-odd feet, 37 feet, I think. I think that's the measurement. With the request for waivers of variances that are sure to come along, we're going to have, in a very long lot, somewhere they're going to be building. Yeah, they may be offset a little bit, but the sideline variances are going to be there. I think it's going to upset the view of these waterfront properties, not the view of the properties, but how this looks, the character of that street and that development. I'm not sure that that's the best way to redevelop the property by subdividing it. You could put a single family dwelling on there. With the new bylaws, you could also put 4 dwellings on that lot, which, given the width of the lot as it presently exists, would be in much better character with the rest of the developments on that street. So I'm not sure why they're asking for this subdivision. Is it simply to be able to sell the resulting developments more easily? I'm not sure that should be within our purview to make the developer's economic life a lot easier. I think our concern should be with how this fits in with the character of Sydney. And I'm not happy with how this is going to look. And as a waterfront property, I think there are better things that could be done with this lot than simply subdividing it. So for that reason, I'll vote against this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Novak. I'll turn to Ms. Verhagen.
Thank you. Through to council, it is important to point out that the proposed lot line configuration could be altered in a way that does allow for the minimum 9 meter by 9 meter building envelope on each property. If they jog the line so it isn't straight, they could easily create two blocks that are 9 meters by 9 meters and not need that variance after all for the side setbacks. So just the current lot line, how they're proposing a straight shot down the property, doesn't allow for that 9 meter by 9 meter square to be fit onto the property. If they jogged it a bit to make a wider part and a narrower part, they could fit in a 9 meter by 9 meter block somewhere and then not need a variance. So it is important to note that council might not see a variance application come forward if the proposed lot line is changed.
Thank you, Ms. Verhagen. I'll turn to Councillor Gurnett.
Sorry, the only reason I brought that up is because it says in here it would be necessary.
Yes, it would, with this configuration, with this proposed lot layout, it would be necessary, but this is not approved, like this is their proposal in terms of the shape of the properties. If they change the line that they're proposing to subdivide, if they shifted that line to put a jog in it or change it to fit the 9 by 9 meter by 9 meter block, then it would not need a variance.
So in the staff report, it's referring to what's laid out on this.
This plan here.
Okay, so
This
that was not
variance.
clear to me in here, so that's why I had that question. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gurnett. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff, just to clarify then, if you'd forgive me. So all we're being asked here is about the frontage and the percentage of frontage. And so, for example, this could be reformatted as some sort of a panhandle lot, the way you've described, so that there is an envelope sufficient, for example, to not require variance, if I understood you correctly. And that
yes, that's right.
as the approving officer, I guess you would have that discussion with the applicant at the time prior to approving the subdivision.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you. I'll support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. I'll also support the motion for the reasons Councillor Duncan and Councillor Rintoul. We have a very specific motion that we're passing this evening. There is a proposal. This is a proposal that's been presented to us. There could be a different proposal and future plans to come forward to council if there are variances. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Novick is opposed. I'm sorry, Councillor Duck, I didn't record you're in favor? Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you. We're next turning to item 13C, which is street vending license application. And I'll turn to Mr. Newcomb for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is an application from Bombay Bites, which is an Indian fusion food truck. And they're requesting permission to operate their truck daily in Tallista and Iroquois parks from essentially immediately until November 2024. And they're requesting from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. So this is a different type of street vending application than that we've seen in the past, which have typically been more one-off event type of applications. This is more of an ongoing, would be a permanent fixture in the parks. They are talking about alternating between the two parks on a 2-week basis. And I guess from a technical and procedural standpoint, this is certainly something that could be accommodated. However, it is a departure from what we've seen in the past. Other municipalities have moved into allowing vending in parks. District of Saanich has recently set up a program to allow for this. However, given that it's a relatively new thing for Sydney, we wanted to bring forward a bit of a broader discussion for council's consideration with some options, and staff are prepared to take direction on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. So as Mr. Newcomb's indicated, the staff report doesn't lead to a specific recommendation. There are 3 options, but I'll begin with any questions we may have of staff. Seeing none, I would turn to a colleague to put forward a motion. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'll move that staff explore options for enhanced vending opportunities on public property in Sydney and report back at a future council meeting.
We have that move. Do we have a seconder?
A second.
We have it moved in second. I'll turn to the mover.
Thank you. So I think the idea of having street vending in our parks is interesting. However, I have concerns about the location. I don't think, for example, Tallista Park is a good location. There's not much parking there. I don't know where it would be put. I also have concerns about, the amount that we would charge. I think we have to be mindful of giving support to brick and mortar operations. We may recall that, I think it was last year, the year before, there was a ice cream vendor that wanted to operate in Beacon Park, and we weren't in favor of that because, and I think it was good to reject that one, because there's lots of brick and mortar cafes and restaurants in close proximity to Beacon Park. So I have reservations about doing it, but I think there are some good points to it. So what I would prefer to see is for staff to come forward with a little, some more options in terms of what parks specifically do we think it would work. And I think some other sort of fee structure. I don't think $30 a day to operate a commercial enterprise in one of our on public property. I don't think that's fair to the brick and mortar enterprises in the town. So I'm willing to entertain it, but that's why I'd like staff to come back with further information.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to the seconder, Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor O'Keefe was kinder than I was. I was actually going to move it be denied, but then when Councillor O'Keefe suggested the third option, I decided to second it. My reservation for doing that in the first place and for having thought to deny it was simply that I know staff's time is increasingly precious, and I worried about adding something that was not a high priority to their plate. On the other hand, I think, knowing this isn't a high priority, staff can cover it in their time as they see fit, unless they would request us to give them better guidelines about that. I don't think that this proposal as it is should be approved as it is for the reasons Councillor O'Keefe says. For one thing, this would be giving, I think, too much of an advantage to one business, given that we currently don't allow this for other businesses on a continuous basis. Emotionally, I'd like to support a business, and I know that food trucks in particular are a great way to lower the barriers of startup costs for businesses in food and retail, and they fill a niche that brick and mortar restaurants don't necessarily, so they're not necessarily a direct competition. However, I think we have a lot of other food truck businesses and local food truck businesses that don't get the same opportunity. And so having staff come up with a strategy that would allow us to introduce fairness in an application process for local businesses, other food truck businesses, so that would have the same opportunity to use public spaces as this business would be something I'd rather see than to have this business simply be the first one, simply because they asked. So I guess I will ask through the mayor to staff with this option 3 that they did put forward for us to have. When do they envision actually doing that review and reporting back?
Thanks for the question through the mayor to Councillor Duncan. I mean, the soonest I can see staff coming back with anything is 2025, Q2. Definitely not a huge priority. I mean, to be honest, so Sydney has allowed food trucks on private property for many years, basically since 2012. We barely see any. We certainly don't get a lot of requests for food trucks overall. So there's not a ton of demand out there, looking to set up a new food truck business. This is the first one that I know of that's come forward to request a vend in a park. So in that context, I wouldn't put this on the high priority list. And maybe it's better to see higher demand on private property before staff undertake opening it up to public property as well.
Thank you.
Just before turning to Councillor Rintoul, the third option, we've had clarification with regards to a timeline, but we actually have the specific application before us that is requesting August to November. So in addition to that, if that recommendation were to carry, we should also pass a motion with regards to the application as the first recommendation does?
Yes, thank you.
Or first option does. Thank you. Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thanks. I don't support the motion that's before us. I think staff were being a little generous in addressing this and providing this option to go back and put together some potential policy around this for council's consideration. We know the priorities that planning staff have. We know how much has been tasked to them from the province as part of a number of initiatives around housing and where those priorities are. This isn't on that list. I'm happy to move the first option that's proposed by staff if this motion fails. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. I'll turn to Councillor Novick, then to Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't support the current motion. As Councillor Rintoul stated, this would bring this well into the next year and possibly even too late to take advantage of it for next summer. Food trucks are becoming a big thing, not just around here, but in many municipalities. I laud the proponent for thinking outside the box and coming to us with this proposal in the hopes of setting a precedent, of sort of getting the ball rolling towards this. Once something like this has actually happened, I can then see staff going back and say, well, now we have to create a framework around which this is going to work. And that's fair. Come up with a policy paper on that. We do have some policies but maybe something that's a little more specific to this type of proposal. I'm not opposed to the proposal as it's been presented. It appears that the proponent is an established vendor. He has all the required health permits. He's undertaken not to leave waste around, and to basically be a good corporate citizen. I'm not in agreement with going to 11 p.m., but I am in agreement with how staff wrote the second option down, going to 9 p.m. I think that's reasonable. And I'd actually like to see this, and it would be a great test case to see whether or not the citizens of Sydney and the visitors to Sydney embrace this concept or not. They may not, and the proponent might discover that this was a wasted exercise. But the only way you find out these things is by trying it. I'm not convinced that waiting for a staff report is the best way to go. It's a theoretical premise, whereas this is a practical test. I don't think that the locations would be in conflict with existing vendors in town. I think that the proposed sites of Iroquois Park and Tulista Park are far enough away from Beacon Avenue that if somebody is hungry while they're walking the Seawalk and there's a food truck there and they go over to get I don't know what Bombay Bites are going to be offering, but let's say it's a butter chicken taco for all I know, that might be something that they do, and somebody has the opportunity to to get a bite to eat there, which is in my mind notably missing from that area as an area that attracts people of all stripes, both tourists and local citizenry. So I was a little slow on my button, and I would have been very happy to propose option 2. And if this motion fails, as it may do so, then I'll be very happy to propose option 2 and see where that takes us. I think the only way to see whether or not this concept works is to put it out there and let the public decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. I'll turn to Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to support this motion as it stands, and I think by virtue of us supporting this motion, we're denying the application because they're looking at August to November of this year, not August to November of 2025, I believe, as staff have indicated along the timelines they would get at this. But overall, I think there's enough variation throughout the CRD on how this is managed that we need to look at it more at some point in time as staff have the time to do that, but not a priority. The other part is that staff pointed out that how event-based food trucks have been there on occasion, whether it's been on 3rd Street or other events, and we haven't ever had one where it's been there on a continuous basis. So I'm not quite sure that this kind of opportunity would not bring into conflict with local providers, bricks and mortar food suppliers. So I will continue to oppose this motion as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. Sorry, you've spoken for a first time? Yeah. I won't support this motion. We have an application before us, and I think we should determine that application. As the staff report indicates, we don't have a history of food truck operations in our parks operating on a long-term and continuous basis. However, we have been receptive in the councils have been receptive to food trucks for events in our parks, and they seem to be successful. And I just don't think that denying this application, which would be a test, which would be a pilot, if you wish, to forward a larger project where staff are considering all of the parks or many of the parks in the community and setting a larger framework is the way to go. So I'll leave my comments there. And are there any second-time speakers? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm influenced by the comments of some of my colleagues, so am I allowed to vote against my own motion? No? Okay, well, I guess yes? I am allowed, okay.
You're taking into consideration the discussion?
Yeah, I'm
So
taking
that's- That is reasonable.
into consideration the discussion, and especially the point that, as staff have mentioned, we haven't got a whole lot of food trucks chomping at the bit saying this is something that they want to do. So there doesn't seem to be a high demand for it. Other colleagues that have mentioned staff have got a lot on their plate. It wouldn't get looked at till 2025. So, that's a long time away. In terms of the application itself, I would probably be more inclined to say, no, we just don't do it. Because although,
Okay, Councillor, motivate on this motion.
Oh,
and
okay.
You'll have an opportunity.
okay,
after
so for those reasons, I'm more inclined to vote against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? That is unanimous and the motion is defeated. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that the application from Bombay Bites to vend in Tillista Park and Yercraw Park be denied.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. I'll turn to the mover and seconder and then to Go ahead.
Nothing further.
In looking at what some other municipalities are doing, is I think staff had provided some information by email this afternoon. Saanich is the only municipality, I believe, that allows food trucks in public places, and they charge, I think it's almost $90 a day, and there's some other, I think $400 or something per quarter. But there's a fee structure involved there. Victoria, other municipalities that I've looked at on the mainland, none of them allow food trucks in public spaces. And I believe that, I don't know why it is, but I can only speculate that there's some recognition that by us allowing those food trucks to use our public spaces provides an unfair advantage. We're allowing really cheap retail space, commercial space. So I don't think it's fair from that perspective. There's many of our parks. This one, in regards to this application, I don't think Tillista is a good fit. Yeah, it might be nice to stop and have a butter chicken taco or something at Tillista Park, if that's what Richard is proposing. However, there's very little parking there. The art gallery is there. They already don't have enough parking. That's a well-used area. There's the beach volleyball. There's a lot of people that go down and walk there. So I wouldn't be in favor of using up any of our parking spaces. We've already had issues there with vehicles having to use accessible parking spaces to get in there to do, work and other things there. So to give food trucks additional parking space, I'm just not in favor of. I don't think it's a big priority. The public isn't chomping at the bit for it, and neither are the vendors, so I don't see the point in pursuing it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to support this motion. As I said earlier, I think this would be a great, and the mayor used the correct term, pilot project. I think it would motivate staff to get on the topic and come up with a more comprehensive set of policies and procedures. This is a grand total. This application is for a grand total of 70 days, from August the 20th until October 31st. The number of people that are going to be inconvenienced by this, I think you could probably count on the fingers of one hand, if that many at all. I think it's a great opportunity to test whether or not this is something that we want to have a more comprehensive program of in the future. I don't think that, I think if anything, Tulista, or rather the artsy gallery, might benefit by this, because it's well known in retail circles that when you bundle interesting retail operations together, it acts as a greater attraction and brings more people to the area. So I'm not convinced of the argument that it would negatively impact artsy gallery. If anything, it would probably help it for at least the short time that it's there. Parking, yes, that could be an issue, but I'm not convinced that that's enough to just say no in a blanket way to this. I think it's something that could be addressed over time if this turns out to be a successful experiment. And I don't think that, I don't think that we're doing ourselves a service by just pushing these people away without giving them an opportunity to, or giving us an opportunity to see whether or not this will actually work. I think there would be a lot of people in town that would appreciate the ability to have something to eat while they're on their walk, while they've just completed a game of basketball at Iroquois Park, or a game of soccer when the kids are out there playing soccer. This is the sort of thing that helps to make a city or a town an interesting place when there's a lot happening in these environments. So I'm going to vote against this, and I would really like to see the number 2 option on the floor, and we'll follow up with that if this option fails. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll just comment that I'm not supportive of this. I won't repeat some of the other points put forward that I support, but the Cedarwood, former Cedarwood Inn property is kitty corner to Tulista Park, and when we rezoned it for a commercial space on the corner, and it's likely it could be a Class B restaurant, or provide some of the things that this food vendor truck is. That location will be paying taxes and that sort of thing. There are other considerations. When you see food vendor trucks of this nature at the Thursday night market, they all have generators that operate, and that's not a typical use in our parks. Staff have mentioned in the report that we do have regular event licenses that are provided, and so are we then going to build into this framework that they can operate 12 months of the year, but not if there's going to be an event with other food vendors? I'm not sure there's a need here that we need to that's compatible with the current use of our parks, as we're seeing in other municipalities. While I will acknowledge that Saanich, which has over something like 150 parks and some very large parks, may have other considerations that they've had. I'll leave my comments there, and seeing no further speakers, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Novick is opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We're turning to item 13D, which is a CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund Round 2 grant application. I'll turn to Mr. Newcomb again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is an overview of an application to the second round of the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation's Housing Accelerator Fund grant program. As council is aware, the town applied for this grant program last year in 2023, but unfortunately we were not successful. This spring, the federal government announced a second round of funding for the program, and staff see value in applying again for this. We should note that the amount of funding this time around is 10% of the original funding, and the number of applicants is expected to be quite high, so there will be a lot of competition out there. The town's housing action plan, which is the basis for the grant, is roughly similar to last year's grant application, about 130 additional dwelling units over the baseline growth rate, looking for about $4.5 million of funding. And if successful in the grant application, staff would need to do a little more work on the details of each of those actions, but we'd like to see if we get the grant first before we delve into that stuff. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. If not, we do have a staff recommendation. Councillor Duncan.
I'll move the staff recommendation. that council approve the town's housing action plan and an application to the CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund grant program for the August 2024 intake.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. I'll turn to the movers.
No, I think nothing to add from staff's report. Thank you.
Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to pass along my thanks to staff for finding, again, this opportunity. I will temper my enthusiasm from last time because I don't know what the expectations are, but you know, you can't be successful if you don't try. So thank you for doing this on behalf of the residents, and hopefully we'll be able to be successful this time, because 130 units of potential affordable housing would be huge in this community. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you, and thank you to staff. Returning to item 13E, which is renewed Canada Community Building Fund Agreement. I'll turn to Mr. Hissick, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're bringing forward the renewed 10-year agreement for the CCBF. The town has received close to $9 million in funding since inception, nearly 20 years ago, and we've spent over $7 million on eligible projects. This new agreement will deliver over $3.1 million just over the next 5 years. Project eligibility rules have been expanded again, which is always good news. Originally, it started off a little more limited, but through each successive renewal, it's opened up for more eligible projects, which is always appreciated. In our context, this time around, we might include fire halls, which not going to help, and also potentially fire trucks in what we may use the funds for, but that will require some thought and planning, since in our current financial plan, the anticipated funding is already fully committed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff, probably Chief Mickelson would be best to answer this one. I'm just thinking in terms of the implications of Bill 44 and the housing target order that we received for 468 units in the next 5 years, and taking that into consideration, probably close to 1,000 people if that plays out, and how that increase in density would impact any needs the fire department might have in terms of resources where these funds might potentially be used.
Through the Mayor, the Councillor Garnett, that's somewhat of a loaded question, so. But nevertheless, we'll continue to look at our requirements. There is a staffing plan in place for one additional hire next year, and I would say a lot of that in respect to response times and staffing and what we call weight of response would somewhat be linked to our ability to nurture and foster our interoperability with our neighbors, and to maximize those resources in the most efficient way. If we could make some additional headway there, I think that would go a long way to alleviating immediate requirements. I think there's some definite options there that I think would be palatable. Obviously, as populations and density in our built form becomes greater, obviously our requirements will be more, but I do think there's opportunities to maximize efficiencies prior to that.
And sorry, if I may, with equipment as well, is more of what I was, based on what they're saying, it could be used for, like fire trucks, that kind of thing. Would there be a potential increased need for those kind of resources that we might be able to use this funding for, in terms of various kinds of, I know we just purchased a ladder truck not that long ago, but you know, things do age out, and if they have to be used more often based on density increase.
Again, I would say the rationalization of you know, large fixed assets like apparatus, we could again utilizing and working with our neighbors. I think again there's still efficiencies we could realize, but also as we get busier, like this is the first time that we've ever had to replace a set of tires on a new engine. Was 3 or 4 years ago. Usually they would last the entire life of a vehicle.
Yeah.
Now we're replacing tires at 10-year intervals, because based on how busy we are, and a set of tires is, you know, $6,000–7,000 for a truck at least. So as we're busier, costs will increase without question.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Hissick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, please don't encourage him.
Thank you. If there, Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Just feeding off Councillor Garnett's question in regards to fire department infrastructure. A question through you to staff. With the new legislation, Bill 46, does that not provide us the opportunity to have a DC within our DCCs to, if we choose to do that, to incorporate infrastructure for fire departments as well? I think it does. And whether
There are some expanded abilities there, but as we work through it, you have to realize it's going to be a balancing act between putting these funding mechanisms in place versus affordability. And all of this will add to negatively impact the affordability component. So we have to be cognizant of that. And there's a lot of work for us to work through with not only the existing DCC rules, but the expanded ACCs that were added on top of that.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. We do have a recommendation. Councillor Until?
Thank you. Move the recommendation that the new 10-year 2024 through 2034 Canada Community Building Fund agreement between the town and the UBCM be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I just want to comment that we're thankful to the FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, for the advocacy work they've done with the federal government. We're appreciative to UBCM, Union BC municipalities, for their work and also administering the program. And it's helpful to local governments to have sustainable funding over a future 10-year period with the important decisions on infrastructure and other community amenities that we have to consider. I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Returning to item 13F, the award of tender 2024-007, Parks Vehicle Capital Replacement for 2 trucks. We do have a staff report. There's no introduction. If you wish to turn to questions, or we could have the recommendation come forward. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm not sure through you to staff because I see Mr. Robinson's not in attendance. I was just curious, the top end ones, speaking to the Vernon ones and why they weren't adequate for what we needed, there's a difference of about $2,500 between the two. Was there any indication from the provider in terms of timelines of when you need them and whether they can meet that commitment?
Through to Councillor Garnett. I'm not familiar with that. We are recommending the lowest bid that was compliant.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. A question through you to staff. I recall some discussions about, I think it was Parks vehicles, or maybe it was other trucks that we were looking to get electric vehicles. Is that something that we're still looking at, or is that not for these types of trucks, but for other trucks that we have?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, we have purchased 2 electric gators in recent years.
Okay.
So we have started that conversion, but we do require these more heavy duty trucks, which they're just not making electric vehicle options for at this time.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. If we could have a recommendation come forward. Councillor O'Keefe.
I recommend that the town purchase, or I move that the town purchase 2 new 2024 Chevrolet Silverado 3500 HD medium duty cab and chassis trucks at a total price of $136,494.40 from Bannister Chevrolet Buick GMC in Chilliwack, BC.
I'll second it.
We have it moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Returning to item 13G, which is a sponsorship opportunity for the 2024 South Island Powwow. And I'll turn to Ms. Judson for an introduction, please.
Thank you. So this staff report's an opportunity for council to consider whether they'd like to continue sponsoring the South Island Powwow at Royal Athletic Park on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. That's September 30th. And if so, what level of sponsorship that might be. The town of Sydney has sponsored the South Island Powwow since its inception in 2022. We've committed $5,000 each time. This year, staff recommend continued sponsorship, but at a lower level of $2,500. This would leave more funding in the town's newly established $10,000 annual reconciliation fund to support initiatives on the peninsula that have more direct benefits to Wasanic nations.
Thank you for the report and for the introduction. We have a recommendation. Councillor Novick?
Can I ask a question before we
Please do.
go to that? I go through you to staff. Ms. Judson, do we have any indication of any other programs that would take that balance of the $10,000 program? So do we know where that money's going at this point?
Yes, at this time, we have spent $3,500 on the local powwow, the Watanomi powwow, which was known before as the Yellow Wolf Intertribal Powwow. It's in Central Saanich. It's been running for several decades. We've also set aside earmarked $5,000 with the RCM on a project we've been working on with the RCMP as well as North Saanich. There's an interest in working with a local carver to create a welcome pole outside of the RCMP Center, a detachment, and the hope there is that people within local nations know that they are serviced by the RCMP as well, and they're very welcome and would be treated respectfully if they choose to seek services there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm happy to make the recommendation.
Please go ahead.
So I'll move that council sponsor the South Island powwow with a contribution of $2,500, which would make the town of Sydney a bronze sponsor.
Second.
We haven't moved in second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Duncan, please.
Yeah, just briefly that I'm glad that we've decided to continue sponsoring powwows. I believe this is a really good forum, the powwow format, for specifically reconciliation actions because of the nature of the powwow. I know it's a Plains cultural form, but I believe, I don't remember which one of the powwows. I think the one in Central Saanich was founded because of an intermarriage. Somebody's mother was actually a Plains nation, and that introducing that kind of cultural form was what they did to honor that line. It's not native to the coastal tribes, but people picked it up because it's just really fun. And the great thing about the way these powwows are run is that this is a way for Indigenous groups to use a native cultural form that invites all nations onto it, including, more recent immigrants and people from all over the world, as well as the Indigenous nations, to partake of this local culture. And so I think it's something that makes people feel comfortable and included, and particularly the First Nations, of showcasing the best parts of their culture in a way that makes them feel proud, but also makes people feel proud to be welcomed onto the land in a really positive way as a reconciliation event. So I'm quite happy to continue sponsoring these. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Garnett.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I fully support this, and I'm thankful to staff for bringing this forward, and thankful for noticing that there's more local attachment to this fund, which is what I think we envisioned it would be used for. And with that in mind, I think for the rest of council, something to consider is that as we move forward, if there seems to be more interest from our local First Nations, we might give consideration during budget deliberations to potentially increasing the amount from 10,000. Just something to put in the back of everybody's minds. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And so I'll now call a question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. And we do have the item under 13H, which is the monthly building permit report. That is for information. Are there any questions of staff? Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff, just curious, just noted that 2 of the projects on here do not show expiry dates, and if there's a reason for that, or if it's just a yet to be completed component to the report.
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, staff are working with the applicant just to get the final set of revised plans and then get that one off to land titles to get registered. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so we don't require a motion. We're receiving it on the agenda this evening, and so we'll next turn to correspondence, and we have the item that Councillor Garnett raised, and I'll turn to Councillor Garnett to speak to that.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is a letter from Mr. Judson. and it's with regards to the waste collection. And I just want to bring it forward because sometimes we get letters and we don't comment on them. I think it's important because this is not the first letter we've had in regard to this on our agenda, and also receiving emails at home, finding conversations on social media locally about this, and also having people come up to me in the community and speak to me about the similar circumstances that they've encountered. So I just was hopeful that we just signed this contract not too long ago, and at the time I had said this is a good deal. It's considered to what I pay in North Saanich. It's quite a bit less, but it was a large increase, and I think sometimes we look at the fiscal component, but there's also the service component that makes it a good deal. So I think I would just like to, through you to staff, just if they could provide a response to if the provider has mentioned what the particular issues are that's causing these missed days of delivery and pickup, and if they've suggested any possibilities or ways that they can address these issues going forward.
I'll turn to Ms. Clary, then Mr. Hisson.
I'll defer to Ms. Clary.
Sure, through to Councillor Garnett. MTERRA has been having some challenges this year with staffing, and they have new staff in their office here in Victoria, and some of the drivers are also new. So they are working out some of the growing pains with that, but staff have been working with them very closely to make sure they're developing recovery plans when they do miss days. There has been a bit of a communication gap at times, and there was a period where their call center wasn't working, and it seems like many different things have just stopped working all at once, and it seems to happen every few weeks right now, it feels like. But staff are working with them to try to do better. They do have a manager in Victoria who does, when residents do call into the call center, if they leave a message, everything gets emailed to this manager. And today I know he was calling all the residents back to let them know when they would be getting their yard waste pickup. That was missed on Friday. And we are trying to communicate it out on our website and on social media when we do have that recovery plan. And yes, as I said, they have had issues. Their driver was injured for a period of time, and so they don't have wide backup plan for drivers. They were bringing someone in from Vancouver for a little while to backfill that position. So we are working to make improvements as the year goes on.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Through you to staff. I'm just wondering, in contracts like this, are there clauses in there related to performance? So, and that's one question. And how do we track performance? Like, I know when I've called in to say, hey, my garbage isn't being picked up, I'm told to go and, contact MTERRA directly. So how do we know that what the level of service is out there? And then what measures do we have in place to kind of call them out if they're not performing to a certain standard?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, we have implemented a daily check-in. So every day at the end of shift, their manager actually emails town staff to let us know whether or not work was complete. Sometimes there is a miss where a new driver might not realize they missed a section of town, which is what happened on Friday and Saturday this past week. The driver didn't realize, so that's why it wasn't reported to us initially. So typically they would get the report from the driver if they missed it, and then they would let us know, and they would say, we are picking it up the next business day, or whenever they're able to get an extra truck into Sydney to do that pickup. They are required to provide monthly reports of misses and their call reports. So I know they are tracking the calls that they get each day. The contract does allow the town to go do the pickup and then charge it back to them if there was extenuating circumstances. However, that is challenging in itself in that we don't have equipment to do the job efficiently. We could do that in an extreme circumstance, however.
Okay, that's great. I think that's good for the public to know that kind of we're on it and we're focused on it and we're holding them accountable, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Mr. Hisik?
Thank you. We did have a call scheduled with them last Friday to just reinforce to them how important it is for the town's service reputation to be maintained here. Unfortunately, that call has been postponed due to holidays until early September, but we will be impressing upon the management and the ownership that we are not satisfied and we expect huge improvements.
Thank you. Thank you to all staff. I'll turn to Ms. Nelson. Normally when we lift, or we have items under correspondence, we either pass a motion directing something or we pass a motion to receive. Should we do that in this instance? Okay. So we have covered that matter, and we'll move to the remaining correspondence under 15 under correspondence for information. Those 5 items, they are being received on our agenda and don't require a motion. We don't have notices of motion under 16 today, so I'll turn to Councillor Garnett to kindly read our motion to go in camera.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move it in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of the council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters regarding personal information about an identified individual who holds or is being considered for a position, a potential litigation affecting the municipality, and a proposed provision of a municipal service pursuant to section 90.1A, G, and K of the Community Charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
We have it moved and seconded. All in favor? The motion carries. Thank you. And if we could have a mover and seconder to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. We'll have the